Hopefully, folks, you can all see my screen. Go ahead and come off mute and squawk if you can't see it. And I am just going to roll forward here. I'm going to turn off my own camera just to make it easier for you to spot stuff and bring us on through it. So, welcome. Good evening. Hope you've all had an awesome soaring season. And I hope for any of you that have the opportunity to continue to do some fall soaring, that you are able to get out and do it, whether that's here in the States, over in France, or down in the Southern Hemisphere. Never stop flying. For tonight, we have a pretty important set of topics to cover. So I'm just going to leap right into it here. We're going to talk about some upcoming events, including our training center closing, our annual banquet and awards. We're going to talk about the future of the organization, and this is going to be a pretty big and hefty topic tonight. So look forward to everyone putting their thinking caps on. We're going to talk about summer soaring memories here and lighten the mood after the big topic. We'll talk a little bit about how to stay active in the off-season, and that includes some condor soaring, some communications and connections that we can keep alive with each other, and then we will adjourn for the evening. So let me just rip right into this. Upcoming events. Just a few days away, we are closing down the Ephrata Training Center. Big thanks go out to Dennis Vreeken and Steve Northcraft, and possibly one or two other folks who already a couple of weeks ago closed down and winterized the bathhouse. We very much appreciate that. Getting that winterized and getting the lines drained so we don't have pipes freezing and bursting is always a big deal. So thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for helping out and making that happen already. However, we still need to do some tidying up and some winterization of the main training facility and a couple of annual maintenance items. We try to make this as fun as we can make it. So if you can make it out on Saturday, October 7th, please come out and spend a little bit of time giving back to the organization, the facility. If we can get 6, 8, 10 folks to show up, we can get this knocked out in just a matter of a few hours and feel real good about where we are with the facility heading into the winter. We'll have pizza there and stuff for people to enjoy lunch as a thank you for coming out and helping out. And if the weather's good and people want to take some tows and stretch the closing over both Saturday and Sunday, we can certainly get a tow pilot arranged and do a couple tows before we finish the closing out and call it a season. So by a quick show of hands, if you can use the raise hand emoji or button on Teams, can you raise your hand if you think you can make it out to Ephrata on the 7th to help out a little bit?
No, will the training facility be open for overnight stays this weekend, or is it hotel only?
No, it should be available for folks to use on the night of the 7th into the morning of the 8th.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So it looks like we've got at least 5 or 6 folks that raised their hand. Thank you so much, especially Andrew, Eric, Tori. Really appreciate that very much. Okay. For those of you that didn't raise your hand, it's not too late. You can decide as late as Saturday morning to come on out and help us. Reminder, there'll be pizza for you, possible tows. We'd love to have your help. And please don't be shy about spreading the word. Thank you. And I'm just going to go ahead and lower people's hands so that we don't have confusion later on. Thank you. All right. Next up, a few days after the closing of the facility, we are going to begin our annual elections cycle. As a quick reminder for folks that are not familiar with this or it's been a while, we will be holding our board meeting on October 10th. That's why I've chosen that date. After that board meeting, we should be able to use our online election system to send out the call for nominations for directors. You will be able to nominate anybody you like who is an active member in good standing. we will then take everyone who has accepted a nomination, so they will have a chance to decline if they so choose, and we will convert that into our elections ballot, which will run in late October and November. And we'll have more details when the time comes there. That'll be a 30 to 40-day process. One thing you will not do is you will not be able to nominate me. Per our bylaws, I am automatically on the ballot whether I like it or not. You will be able to choose whether to throw me out of the chairmanship position and choose somebody else as chairman next year. But please hold your applause on that until after this meeting. Seriously though, please put some time and thought here in the next few days into which members of our organization you think would do well in helping guide us through the next year or two. And I say that especially because, as you'll see here, we've got some big decisions to make about the future of the organization, and it's important that we have the right people with the right level of energy and interest on the board. So your choices do matter here. November 6th will be our next general meeting, so roughly a month from today. Topic TBD. And then December 2nd at 11 a.m., I'm happy to announce that Matt Coleman, thank you very much, Matt, has secured us an annual banquet location. It'll be just like the last couple of years at the McMenamins Anderson School location. That's in Bothell, Washington, just outside of Seattle. We'll be putting up tickets available on the SGC website. Prices will be slightly higher than last year, but believe me when I say that this is the most affordable event that we could have and still provide decent food and allow everybody a place to meet and socialize and enjoy each other's company here as we head into the wintertime. Matt and others on the board looked high and low for event venues, and it was really hard to find a place, first of all, and second of all, a lot of the places wanted close to $100 a head, which we realize is just exorbitant for a lot of folks here for this event. So we're really trying to keep it fun and affordable for as many people as possible. And as long as we get decent participation, we should be good to go here with the McMenamins banquet. It will, as you note from the time, be a midday event. I know people, again, tend to like an evening event. Unfortunately, the evening events cause the cost to go way up, and we're trying to strike that balance of availability, timing, and cost. We've had good luck with McMenamins in the past. I think the folks that were there at last year's banquet felt that it went pretty well, and so we should be able to duplicate that and maybe even improve on it this year. Any questions about the banquet date, location, time, etc.? All right, hearing nothing, I will move on. Again, stay tuned. We'll send out a mass email once tickets are available and you can sign up for the event. A couple days after the banquet will be our December general meeting. And at that time, at the time of the general meeting, we should be able to do things like announce, hopefully, our new board of directors for 2024 and give you guys a preview of what the year is going to look like and what some of the schedule information is going to start taking shape for 2024. So now I'm going to turn to the big topic for tonight, which is SGC's future. I'm going to cover a couple of primer topics here because at this meeting tonight, we have people with a variety of levels of involvement in our organization and years of experience with the organization. Some of this stuff that I'm going to say to folks may seem old hat for you, but it's going to be somewhat new or clarifying for other folks. So bear with me as we run up and set the table here. All right. So first, what is the SGC? You know, a lot of our members, we have typically 150 to 160 people as members by the end of every season. But we know that a lot of them only come out for one or two big events per year. And they kind of sign up for the event, they show, they pay for their toes, they go away. So it's important that we stress tonight, we are a member-driven not-for-profit, right? We are a membership. We're not a commercial operation. We're not a place where you go and there's people paid or compensated some way to be there, ready to take your money, ready to give you a tow, right? We are a member-driven organization. We try as the board to reflect the will of you, a member of the organization. And it's a two-way street with your involvement and your priorities mattering. And also your involvement and your priorities determining what's possible. We're a not-for-profit. We own 2 tow planes and a variety of ground support equipment that enable operations at Ephrata and other soaring sites in the Northwest. It was the most elegant way I could summarize what it is that we have, what it is that we do. If you look at our Articles of Incorporation from the year 1954, they state that we exist to foster, promote, engage in, and conduct all phases of motorless flight. So, a lot of people know that there is a second organization with SGC in its name, and that's the SGC Soaring Foundation. And there's often a lot of confusion between these two organizations. And you'll understand why I bring this up a little bit later on. But again, to set the table, how do we relate to the SGC Soaring Foundation? Well, the SGC Soaring Foundation was established in 1999, so it's a much newer, much younger organization. It is a true 501c3 nonprofit, which means it's exempt from federal taxes, but it also falls under a different level of scrutiny in how it operates and how it's supposed to operate in the eyes of both Washington State and the U.S. federal government. Its purposes are to support soaring education, provide a venue for soaring, I'll come back to the asterisks in a minute, promote soaring in the Northwest, sponsor contests and events, and assist youth and new pilots. Now, the asterisks. Those asterisks about providing a venue for soaring. Quick bit of history for folks that are newer to these organizations. The SGC Soaring Foundation, the reason it was established in 1999 was that it was the primary vessel used to fund the training facility. People made donations that were tax deductible to the Soaring Foundation in order to enable the Soaring Foundation to construct the facility and own it with a low overhead attached. Okay. Now, just because the Soaring Foundation was established and that was one of the main things people did with it initially, doesn't mean that that's its only purpose. Like I said, it lists as its mission all these other things at the end of that statement I wrote. The Soaring Foundation does own the physical facility and the bathhouse in Ephrata, and it holds the lease with the Port of Ephrata. So the Port of Ephrata doesn't actually lease directly to the SGC. They lease to the foundation, and then the foundation sort of subleases it to the SGC via a grant or a memorandum of understanding. Okay, so bottom line, these are two separate organizations that have related missions, but they're separate legal entities. They're treated differently for tax purposes, and the Soaring Foundation is not under any obligation to support only the SGC. In fact, its mandate covers the Pacific Northwest, and without going into too much detail, because I'm not a lawyer and because the Soaring Foundation is meeting with lawyers to understand some of the ramifications there as laws have changed since 1999, we have to be aware of the fact that if the SGC Soaring Foundation acted in a way so that only the SGC was benefiting from its activities, that might put the foundation in jeopardy of losing its nonprofit status, because there'd be questions about whether it's sort of self-dealing and actually a part of the SGC as opposed to being an independent entity, which is what is legally supposed to be. So if you're curious for more details or anything to supplement this wall of text I've just thrown at you, sorry, you can find relevant documents and agreements on the SeattleGliderCouncil.org. If you click on the information bar at the top, menu item at the top, you can find our articles of incorporation and bylaws for the SGC. And if you click on the foundation link on the menu bar, you can find the same documents for the SGC Soaring Foundation. All right, so why the heck am I telling you about this? Well, because you need to understand how these two organizations are separate and who owns what in order to understand the things I'm about to talk about in terms of our operations, our finance, and our tow plans. So the first thing is our finances. SGC's finances have been delicate for about 20 years. And this goes back to the fact that in the long distant past, this goes before my involvement even, some of the Northwest Soaring clubs, such as the old Boeing Club, would move their entire operation to Ephrata for the entire summer. And this drove a whole lot more activity at the Ephrata facility over an extended time. But since those organizations like the Boeing Club, the Evergreen Club, and others no longer spend multiple weeks or multiple months operating out of Ephrata, SGC's finances have been kind of treading water for a long time, and the SGC periodically has had to look at ways of maintaining itself without those revenue streams. COVID, of course, came and blew a hole in everything like it did for a lot of businesses and organizations. And we have bounced back some, but not a lot. And presently, we only have about $30,000 in cash, $21,000 in our main account, and $17,000 in our reserve or investment account. As a footnote to that, okay, you might think, oh, $38,000 doesn't sound bad, but here's the thing. Every year, at the beginning of each year, when we want to start up operations, we have to pay for things like our first quarter of rent. We have to pay for our annual insurance costs for the tow planes, for the facility, for our events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All told, those bills in the February-March timeframe add up to between $15,000 and $20,000. So we can't spend down near $0 and be okay with that. We have to keep about $15,000 to $20,000 available as cash every winter so that we can actually start flying. So for those of you that are keen on math, you can see that basically the $15,000 to $20,000 to pay bills and the $21,000 in our main checking account kind of offset, and that leaves us with $17,000 in our reserve or investment account. And that's where we stand essentially. Okay. So let's take a moment and talk about operations, which I totally misspelled there. In 2023, I'm happy that we saw a notable rise from the COVID years, right? Unfortunately, our tow total of about 360 tows is still far below our target, which was roughly 420 to 450 tows, okay? Now, this is important because we spent a lot of time off season last year doing some financial modeling. And I want to thank Chris Clicks and Nan Clicks and Henry Rebick and a couple other folks. I think Jim Dauberful might have been part of this. A whole committee got together and we went back and forth and round several times to look at financial modeling of what our costs would be this year. And overall, I think we did pretty good projecting our costs, minus a couple little hiccups, but those always come up every year. In order to then figure out what people's membership dues and tow fees should be, we look at how many gliders we think are to be parked out at the airport. We look at how many tows we think are going to do. We try to spread those costs across all those target tows. Since we fell short of our target number of tows, we essentially undercharged everybody versus what it really cost to put on an operation this year. And that's just covering expenses. That's not putting any money away for the future. So we're looking at a landscape here where we are short on cash, where we are not having a lot of operations, and we don't see any easier, obvious ways to change that. In fact, I'm going to call this challenge number 1. We have seen a steady decline in operations that are not part of events for many years. And we've talked for a few years about making Ephrata more of an event site, a destination site. We tried this year a bit to push organic operations, weekend operations, encourage people to come out, use Sign Up Genius, have folks like Jim McNeil shuffling the sign up genius every so often to keep fewer dates there and more towards the top so it's easier to use and scroll through. But our decline in operations seems to be just structural, right? Most other population centers and gliding centers are a couple-hour drive from a freighter, and people just aren't willing to drive for a weekend op anymore. They'll come out for a 3 to 4 day op, they'll come out for a week-long op, and that's awesome. We love those events. We love those encampments. I'm probably speaking for everybody on this call saying some of my fondest summer memories are hanging out at a freighter with a bunch of you folks, having fun, whether we're on the ground or in the air. But organic operations just do not happen. I would be surprised if we got anywhere near 100 tows at all this year from just weekend ops. The vast, vast majority of those roughly 360 tows were from our events and major encampments. This means that in a perfect world, we'd love to continue having organic and weekend operations. We'd love to try to find a way to push it more, but we just can't count on those operations for revenue planning, right? We just can't. We just can't. So that's challenge number one. We're going to set that box aside for a minute and just know that that is a challenge that is out there that we all need to think about how we're going to deal with or address it. There's many ways we could do that. We could raise rates to operate at a smaller operational tempo. We could, have certain minimums in terms of fees. There's a bunch of different ways we could tackle that, but those are things we can brainstorm. We're going to set them aside for the moment. We'll come back to them. The next major issue is our tow planes. And this plays into both the finances and the operations, and you'll see how in just a minute. We have a Pawnee. Pawnee's in decent shape. It's not absolutely fresh as spring chicken. It's not about to need an overhaul or fall apart. It's in decent shape. And in fact, due to some things that happened over the last couple of years with maintenance personnel, it has new fuel system components and had some other work done in 2022. Overall, it's a good tow plane. It's in good shape. Nothing standing out there unless somebody raises their hand and lets me know now about something I'm not thinking of. Cessna 182, our other tow plane. Now, this has been a topic that's received a lot of attention in certain circles and with certain groups over the last couple of years, but I'm not going to go over all that old ground. All I'm going to say is that lots of work has been done to make it a high-performing tow plane, and I want to thank Chris Clicks, especially this year, for finding things like the misrigged flap system and a few other things that were holding that tow plane back from being as good as it could be. This year was the first year where that tow plane has really check. I think my microphone just died. Can somebody let me know if they're hearing me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. If it dies again, I'll switch to a different mic. Sorry, folks. All right. What I was saying was this was the first year in which this tow plane was really, I think, optimized in terms of being the tow plane it should have been all along and performing at the level that we should expect it to be able to perform at year in and year out. And it was great. It's towed heavy two-seaters this year, such as my Duodiscus and DG1000, and has the tow cards to prove that it actually cycles faster than a Pawnee. Once you include the climb time, the landing time, the taxi back time, and everything, it has better fuel economy, so it can take more tows before refueling. It can do longer aero retrieves. There's other advantages. It's got tricycle gear, so we don't have tail wheel requirements for checking out tow pilots. It's much easier as a two-seater to check out tow pilots. However, the engine hasn't been overhauled in 40 years and is now roughly, I think, about 300 hours over TBO. Chris, let me know if I'm wrong on that one. Pretty sure it's about 300 hours over TBO. It was bore scoped, and we replaced a cylinder about a year ago. And at that time, I'm not aware of any other major problems that were discovered. This year, and I will just raise my hand and say I was one of the people saying, hey, let's not rush to overhaul it because TBO is just a manufacturer's number. It's not associated with any known wear items or anything like that. It's just they pick a number and they stick to it, right? Let's do it on condition. And so it wasn't overhauled last year. Not that our financial situation was any different last year either, really. But I just want to be upfront and transparent and say I'm one of the people that has been saying, let's not replace it if it's not broke. Okay. So the people know where my bias is. So we didn't. And other people agreed with that decision, by the way. So it was bore scoped. We replaced the cylinder. It seemed to be doing well. You folks that towed with it this year, you tell me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, it provided reliable, good tows this year, and tow pilots that flew it thought it flew well. However, we do oil analysis at oil changes, and the levels of microscopic copper in the oil jumped quite a bit in one point, and they're still elevated, although they're coming down. And the oil is apparently turning black soon after oil changes, which usually indicates blow-by in the cylinders. And anecdotally, many pilots seem to be concerned about flying the airplane given the number of years that the engine has on it, right? I can't speak to this, but what I'm being told anecdotally is that there are at least a few tow pilots out there who look at the number of years since it was overhauled and say, look, it doesn't matter to me what you say about the bore scope or whatever. An engine that old is not something I'm comfortable flying. And hey, I will also say, as much as I have a bias in this conversation, I don't think it's my place to tell pilots what they should feel safe about or not, right? Every pilot has to make that decision for themselves. So while there's no indication of any imminent failure, and last I checked, the engine's still making good power according to folks that have flown it, our tow plane manager believes that we should overhaul the engine due to its overall age and some of these other things that I've mentioned, like the oil turning black, the high levels of copper, etc. More than one board member has expressed that they believe that we'll get more tow pilots willing to fly the Cessna if it is overhauled. Okay, so why not overhaul it? Well, number one, as mentioned, we're already falling short on our number of tows, and an estimate has been obtained for the overhaul, and it starts at $45,000. And believe it or not, that's a pretty reasonable cost. Some places these days are quoting up to like $60,000 for an overhaul of an engine of this size. So this is a massive expense, and it is more than the amount of money that we have available. So this brings us to a major series, potentially, of decision points for our organization. I'm going to run through a few of them, and then I am going to open it up to any of my fellow board members who want to comment before we open it up to full discussion. And then I'd love to spend 5 or 10 minutes with all of you on this call discussing the situation, throwing out ideas, asking questions, looking for clarification, because again, you, the members, are what matter. It's your voice. You have elected us to represent you, but I don't think that it's right that we make executive decisions without you having all the information and being able to provide input. So I'm going to throw out a few thoughts, a few ideas, a few things that the board has discussed and pondered, and then we'll open it up to wider and wider discussion. So first things first, between the relatively low number of annual tows that we're doing and this expense, the question is, one of the first questions is, do we save both tow planes, or do we sell a tow plane, use that money to pay for the overhaul and or sock some of that money away, and we go down to a one tow plane organization? That obviously has implications on how easy or hard it is to run events, and events are important to us, but that leads to questions about, could we get enough participation from other clubs with their tow planes coming to Ephrata to support these events? Alternately, or supplementally, do we attempt to obtain some kind of loan or financial assistance, either from our bank or from the community or from perhaps the SGC Soaring Foundation in the form of a loan or maybe even a grant to fund this overhaul and keep 2 tow planes. If we do that, how do we make sure we're not right back in this position in a few years? Because the Pawnee engine is continuing to age, and it may be fine now, but we all know that these things only need more money over time, right? They're not suddenly going to never need money again. So if we went down these routes, especially if we try to keep both tow planes, we have to consider, how are we going to make this financially viable over time? That leads to a third potential option, which is we say, hey, soaring at Ephrata is not something that the general public can just do on an inexpensive or reasonably priced basis. And we have to become a premium site and really raise all of our fees and rates to a high level in recognition of the fact that we're going to offer 2 awesome tow planes and all this facility and a high level situation here, or a high level suite of services and facilities. And then the question becomes, okay, how do we make sure that those are maintained without professional paid staff? Can we do that? Do we narrow our audience too much when we do that? Do we supplement the audience with participation grants from the SGC Foundation, or do we do some kind of offset to make it more affordable some other way? There's a huge potential space there, but lots of caveats and problems as well. So that is a whole bunch of ideas thrown against the wall. Here's where you come in. I want all of you to ponder this for a minute. I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask if any of my fellow board members or any members of the SGC Soaring Foundation board would like to supplement my explanations or raise any points before we open it to full discussion. Mr. Bamberg, go ahead. By the way, everyone, Mr. Bamberg is one of the 3 members of the SGC Soaring Foundation board and has been one of the leaders of that organization this year. Go ahead, Mike. Thank you. And then Chris will get you next.
Yeah. So the one of the big challenges over the last
we're not hearing you, I don't think, Mike.
What's that?
Yeah, we're hearing him.
Okay. As long as you're hearing me, you don't have to really see me.
Oh, I can even see you.
Oh, well, poor you. The point is that the foundation has for many years been operating in a way that it appears, according to council, that we might have been making some mistakes. And this week, the board is going to be consulting with Karen Funston, who is a attorney well-versed in nonprofit organizations, including foundations, to get some answers to questions that we have, which we hope will result in the foundation to being able to do something in 2 ways that I think are important. The first one is we'll be able to understand how to offer grants. We don't know that we can do that right now. We're fairly confident we can, but how the process works, we need some guidance on. The other thing is, and this is something that I'm going to probably talk to everybody about every time you see or hear me until January. The foundation is a foundation, which means that it solicits donations because of the nature and a letter that we've received from the IRS. Those donations are tax deductible. Many of you probably work at a company that does a matching donation opportunity. It could be half or equal amount or whatever. And so as you think about your your taxes coming up and you decide that you want to make a donation to someone, please think about the foundation. We know we can do that right now. and we have letters of donation acknowledgement that we will be able to send and share with you. And if your company does a matching donation, then that we can again provide them with that information. The other thing is, as you all know, a lot of little things have been growing or needing attention at the facility over the last few years. And at this point, it looks like the resources will allow us to do a number of those tasks. And Chris Clicks and I have been in conversation with the battery shed. Dennis Verican and I have been in discussions regarding the deck to the bathhouse. The foundation currently has those kinds of resources available. We don't have that kind of manpower available. So when we decide to do something, we're going to need to see how many of you can come and spend a day or two at some point on each of these various projects. So from the foundation standpoint, number one, we're trying to make things happen. And now I'll come to the point of this, which is applicable to the discussion that's ongoing right now, which has to do with being able to give grants, which may include grants to assist this organization, the council, to meet some of its obligations, such as an engine overhaul. No guarantees in place. We're trying to get all that information just as quickly as we can, but it hasn't been an easy process. So that's my update. Any questions? Mr. Tolson, question? Tolton, I'm sorry.
No, I have some comments that I'll make later when
Okay.
you guys
I'm done.
No questions about your stuff.
Okay, anybody else have a question about anything I've said? All right.
Thank you, Mike. Chris Clicks, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to just give the basically the data and show the facts of what the tow planes have been doing and how we arrived at the numbers we did. Is there a way for you to share the Excel file that I put together? Maybe the tow plane cost analysis, 2024 tow plane cost analysis that I did?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. One thing I didn't tell everybody here is I'm all drugged up. I am in the middle of recovering from a really serious sinus infection. So I did not get a chance to insert that into the PowerPoint presentation, and I will happily share that here in just a second. There you go. And if you want to drive, tell me which way you want me to scroll or anything like that,
Sure.
I'm happy to do so. But I will tell everyone right now, there's a lot of numbers on this page, but try not to interpret the whole thing. And sorry to talk over here, Chris, but real quick, I will also say that Chris's numbers here are based on this year. And before anybody says that's 1 year of data, I want to say that while our numbers are slightly different, Chris's numbers and my numbers align very well. And when I say my numbers, I'm talking about tow plane costs and estimates that I've worked out in previous years when I was the treasurer of SGC for several years, from 2014 to 2019, as well as costs that I worked out for tow plane costs when I was treasurer of Evergreen Soaring from like 2009 through 2013 or so. Or 2010 through 2013. So these numbers consistently come back again and again, and they might be $1 or $2 higher or lower, but the bottom line is they always work out this way. So that's been that way for over a decade that I've been looking at these numbers. So without further ado, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so what I did is I did an analysis for each of the tow planes, and then at the bottom of the sheet, I did an analysis with the two tow planes combined. And I've separated out the reserves from the actual costs because the reserves might be considered something different if you don't expect to keep the airplane forever. So I looked at it individually. So if you look at the cost per tow, you can see on the Pawnee, I've got a cost per tow of $107.47. Now, this is based on what we expect for our hangar fee to go up to in 2024. If you want to click on the little note I have for hangar fees there. Yeah. So the note went away.
Sorry, I had to admit a new guest. And if I could just tee this up really quick, Chris, for folks that are not aware, because not everyone's been privy to all these conversations, the large hangar that we use to store our tow planes in Ephrata ran into roof issues, and the whole thing is a long story. The short version is they're saving the hangar, but they're building new T hangars, and they're moving us out. And in all of that shuffle, our tow plane hangar rents are going up by between 50 and 90% per tow plane starting next year. So we are looking at roughly, I believe, about $3,000 a year more in hangar costs than we currently pay if we keep both tow planes. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so yeah, to expand on that, they're going to put turbine airplanes in the big hangar that we're in now. So they're asking us to move out. They're going to provide 2 T hangars for us to take, and those will be with leasehold tax, everything, $335 a month. Basically, what half of what we're paying in 2023 or have been paying in 2023 for the amount for one tow plane is $165.53. So you can see the difference right there. That's just for one airplane. You can double that for 2 airplanes. So the hangar fees have gone up a lot. You can close that note. We've done you can see the number of tows for 2023 is 165 for the Pawnee, and down below in the yellow, it was 158 for the Cessna 182. That's a total of actually 323 tows for the whole year. If you look at, I also calculated pretty carefully what the fuel burn is for each airplane. You can see the up above, the Pawnee was burning 13.03 gallons per hour. The cost, this is the current cost of fuel in Ephrata, so it'd be $92 an hour. And the Cessna 182 was $12.68. So it's a little bit cheaper on fuel for the Cessna. Also, when you look at the total number of tows per tack hour, it came out to 3.76 tows for the Pawnee. And surprisingly, it came out at 3.92 tows per tack hour on the 182. And I think that's partially because the 182 has a constant speed prop and it can return to the field quicker. The other advantage it has is it has bigger fuel tanks, and it doesn't have to go back and get fuel as frequently as the Pawnee does. Let's see, go ahead and scroll down a little further if you could. Let's go all the way down, yeah. So this is the combined data from the 2 tow planes. And you can see that there's the actual income. I looked at our total income that we took in for tows. And if you click on the little red, the flag there for tow plane income down at the bottom right. Okay. So there's a lot of things that factor into this, but basically we had to reimburse Evergreen, Soaring, and PSSA some money, and then I added in the outstanding tow fees and the tows that for September. So it's a pretty accurate number. I checked with Randy today. It's that's exactly how much it is for the whole year, 26,330, and that averages out to $81.52 per tow. Now we budgeted for a 3,000-foot tow at about $75 a tow. And you say, well, this is a little higher. Well, that's because on average, I think tows were being taken higher tows were being taken in 3,000 feet than lower tows. So the average height of the tows were a little more than 3,000 feet. So that's why it came out to $81 per tow. But you can see the total cost based on 2023, which is lower, the total cost based on 2023 with the higher expected hangar fees for 2024. You can see what the cost would be in 2024. Now, there might be some other expenses that go up. Maybe the insurance will go up. We don't know. But basically, we're operating at a loss of $10,000 for 2 tow planes.
And to clarify, that's not taking into account any costs of overhaul. That's not putting any new money away for reserves. That's just treading water and doing the minimum necessary to keep operations going.
Right. This is purely costs versus income. There's no reserves calculated into this. Like I said, I kept that separate earlier. Okay. Can you open the other one that I did for a single tow plane? The other file I sent. It's an analysis for operating 1 tow plane. Okay. So this is a analysis I did if we were to sell 1 airplane. I've taken the hangar cost out, so we're not hangaring a second airplane. We've completely gotten rid of it. This is assuming we keep the Pawnee. It isn't necessarily maybe the best airplane to keep because the Cessna has a lot of advantages, but I've just run the numbers with this. So assuming we keep the fees the same and we average a little bit higher in 3,000 feet at $81 per tow, and our total cost for 1 airplane you can see is about $16,900. I looked at where our break-even point is, and I played with the number that 209 tows for 2023 is about our break-even point. If I lower that number, we start going in the negative down by the tow plane net income. If I raise that number higher, it gets into the positive. And there's a note there that says we did 259 tows with just 1 tow plane in 2022. So you can see we might be able to exceed that, although we only did 165 with the Pawnee this year, but that was because we're operating 2. Now you can really see, get a better picture of where we're coming from on these numbers and what we're dealing with. Any questions on that?
Chris, this is Tori. We talked about the events driving a significant number of tows and demand. I know that sometimes other clubs bring tow planes to those events. In this scenario, though, there would be 1 less tow plane, and there would presumably be lower capacity for those events, maybe substantially lower demand. Did we factor that in? Maybe that's what 2022 looks like in terms of scenarios, right. But that's one thing that was on my mind as we talked through
Well,
it.
our goal was 450 tows. Unfortunately, we didn't get there because basically the aerobatic event got canceled for the year. Now, we may be able to hold the aerobatic event next spring, which would add an additional event for us. I'm not sure that the aerobatic event would be enough to justify 2 tow planes. It'll certainly help, but I think there'd be, we really need to increase activity dramatically to get 2 tow planes to pay for himself, because the fairly high costs of hanging 2 tow planes and insurance for 2 tow planes and all the other things associated with it. And that's not taking into account any kind of money for overhaul or anything like that.
So if we reduce to 1 tow plane, obviously the numbers work out in terms of balancing. On the flip side, though, because those events are a big draw, now it's harder to participate in those events because we have fewer tow planes to tow during those events. It seems like it's also
now I'm an advocate for 2 tow planes because if 1 tow plane goes down, then you're basically shot down unless you have another tow plane nearby that you can call over, and going all the way over to a freighter and then having to take that chance and with just 1 tow plane, that is something that we need to take into consideration. But I think we can also make sure that they're in possibly better mechanical shape and really do thorough annuals. I think there's room for improvement in the maintenance area there to make sure that we don't have the issues. Even this last year, we had a lot of issues because we had that brake master cylinder go bad. If we keep the Cessna, I would definitely replace the other master cylinder so we don't run into that issue again. The flaps, there are a number of little things on the Cessna and even on the Pawnee that came up that really shouldn't come up again with low bear maintenance.
Thanks, guys. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to make sure we get people a chance to ask questions, and then I'll throw, we can open it up to completely open discussion here. And I think the pros and cons of 1 tow plane versus 2 tow planes is a big field to explore and talk about for sure. Impacts it has, ways we can mitigate it, all that sort of stuff. Mike's had his hand up for a little while, so I'm going to ask Mike if you have a question or a comment on this. You want to go ahead, jump in.
So the numbers, of course, Chris has worked with this year have been numbers from a couple of reasonably large size events. We had one of the largest dust ups we've had in recent memory. We had a pretty good contest turnout. However, most of you are not necessarily aware of people that have been approaching the foundation for opportunities to hold camps at the facility. And I'll just point out one in particular. The Hood River group would like to do a youth cross-country camp the first or second week of July. And that would add, hopefully there'd be about 10 participants flying twice a day. So that would add, a week's worth of 10 or 12 tows a day, and that would be a good thing. I guess my point is that both the SGC, members of the various clubs, and the foundation are all looking for ways to increase the number of events that we have through promotion. Some of you may be aware that for the SSA convention, Chris Clicks recommended that we get a brochure together, and my wife made a very nice one, and I guess I need to print out a whole bunch more, don't I, Chris? Because we used them all up at the convention, and it did raise a lot of interest. In fact, I believe that's probably one of the reasons we had people coming all the way from Florida to participate in the contest, and most of them said they're going to try to come back again. So I think that will be a good promotion for the site. Also, one of the contestants, Nick Kennedy, has written an article about the site and the contest for the SSA magazine, which should show up here fairly shortly. So we're going to get some exposure, and I'm not saying that means that we are going to get a whole bunch of things going on, but just raising the awareness, I think, is very useful, and I'm hoping that it will result in what we want. Some of you know that the SSA is promoting these youth camps and will cover a tremendous number of costs. The participants only have to pay $250 for a week of room and board and training and flying, and the SSA picks up the rest of it. And right now, Brian is in the process, Brian Hart of the Hood River Club is in the process of filling out that paperwork, and I've been working with him as an event manager in the past to help him understand some of the things he needs to be looking at and thinking of. But I'm just saying that we shouldn't say that, oh, we're only just going to have the same events we've had before, because we have the foundation trying to grow things. We have various clubs waking up to the fact that the facility is there. I'm in the process of trying to encourage Willamette Valley to come back. For many, many years, they always came back the week before the regional. Of course, right now, Metau is there, but that doesn't prevent people from going to Ephrata. Anyway, that's what I wanted to bring in. I just think that just looking at the numbers that we've got gives us an idea of why we aren't making as much as we wanted to, but also if we simply say we're going to have the same number of events, I think that's being fairly pessimistic.
Thanks, Mike. Just before I call on Jim, I just want to reiterate that, no one here is saying that this is a hopeless situation. It's just we have some important decisions that have kind of been bandied about and kicked down the road for several years, and now we're at the point where we're going to have to make some serious decisions. And again, this is where we want your thoughts, your feedback. As members, you have the most at stake here. And if you guys say, hey, come hell or high water, don't sell a tow plane, that's important feedback for us to try to work on. If you have ideas of how we can make ourselves more sustainable or more successful, we want to hear those ideas. So the more the merrier. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. First, I want to say thanks to the board and Chris and everybody else for doing the analysis. I've actually run that analysis on the tow planes, and I'm familiar with what the reality is of the operating costs. Unfortunately, I think that this business model that we are currently pursuing, and one that has been reliable for the past few decades, is no longer working for a variety of different reasons. And we either need to recognize the fact that we're about to land out, which means going broke and no longer having the SGC, or we need to figure out what we're going to do in order to climb out of this mess. This last year, it was hoped that we would do 450 tows. And I think there was a concerted effort in that, but there are some new realities that are coming our way that I think we need to acknowledge in accounting for some things that didn't exist in the past. First and foremost is the membership size and active participation. That has decreased significantly. We're no longer doing the 600 plus tows like we used to a number of years ago. We're no longer having the huge draw that we used to a lot of this. We're no longer having the weekend events where everybody shows up and they can't wait to get out and look at their scores on OLC. The reality is we are getting down to about half that number. And the other thing that has crept in within the past 5 to 6 years is fire season. Fire season is shutting us down about every other year, anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month or longer. And our soaring season, which was only about 4 months long to begin with before, is now getting even shorter because of that. We financially cannot afford to maintain 2 tow planes based on the current business model that we have. It's not saying it's impossible to have 2 tow planes, but given the current situation, given our current business model, it's not a tenable situation that we can maintain particularly long. I would encourage everybody to kind of step back and really understand that we're in survival mode at this point. If we're going to get out of this, we need to figure out a way of actually getting back to a positive cash flow business. What's been happening is that we've been steadily losing money in this over the past several years. And that was masked by the fact that we were not adequately providing sufficient reserves against the tow plane engines. Now what's happened is we've finally bottomed out, and it's time to overhaul the Cessna 182 engine. But the fact is we don't have the funds to do it because we haven't been charging sufficient amount of money, whether it's for tows or whether it's for the membership fees, whatever that business model is. The bottom line is that there's just not enough money to do it. So I think that the membership needs to understand what the current situation is. Noel, you've done an excellent job of laying that out. Thank you very much. And what I would recommend is that we need to make a really tough choice, is to either sell one tow plane and choose one very deliberately, and what's our money going to go on, or sell both tow planes and get a third tow plane that has lower operational costs. There are a few different options out in front of us, but if we don't make a choice right now, in the end, we're going to be bankrupt and there will be nothing left. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Tony, go ahead.
Thanks, Noel. First of all, I want to agree with everything that Jim just said. There was some things that kind of came up this year that kind of made it even depress the number of tows even further. Is a reluctance for people to sign up to tow if the weather looks a little marginal. Yeah, I can't tell you. I must have signed up for about 3 weekends and I could not get a tow pilot or convince anybody else to sign up as well. Like I said, that was quite regular. I'm not saying that that's going to make up your 100 tows and it's going to get you into the black. That's not the case. I mean, we're basically in a death spiral here, and I guess one of the things I sort of gleaned and learned over the summer is that I don't know enough about the relationship between the foundation and the SGC. I'm under the impression that the foundation is got money, although, you know, if you don't replenish it, it will soon not have money. And but because of the 501c3 category, you're kind of limited on what you can donate. Is the nonprofit status of the foundation worthwhile? What would we lose if we give up the status and just merge those two organizations and at least have some kind of you know, maybe at least refinance and maybe start over again and on a more sustainable basis? Because right now, as you're pointing out, we need a large infusion of money just to be viable. But if we don't change our ways, we're going to be in the same situation in another 5 or 10 years. Okay, that's my question.
Thanks, Tony. You raise, some interesting questions regarding the advantages of the not-for-profit status that the SGC itself has. I think that that's something that, bears looking into. I don't know, and this is something maybe that Mike, you could touch on with Karen when you chat with her, is would it be possible ever for the foundation to take on an operations role? I think that is a very big can of worms that we'd want to check carefully on before we jumped into, merging the organizations or dissolving the SGC and moving directly over to the foundation. The good news is that there is well, I don't know if this is good news. What I will say is that in looking at some of the IRS paperwork that I was doing in preparation for this meeting, it is true that the Soaring Foundation has the word foundation in it, but that is not the same thing as the legal definition of a foundation, which imposes an entirely different set of limitations on what you can do. The Soaring Foundation is a straight 501c3, so it's not as muddy as it could be, I guess is the best way to put that. But I think we'd want some very clear legal advice before we tried to own tow planes and operate, flight stuff out of the foundation. That would be a massive change. Worth, maybe looking at, but definitely a massive change. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so what Noel has touched on has to do with the definition of a foundation. And by the way, the SGC Soaring Foundation is a foundation. And by definition, a foundation seeks after donations and distributes monies in pursuit of its goals and objectives. And we do have something, if you make a donation to the SGC, I don't know how much of it is tax deductible. If you make a donation to the foundation, it's all tax deductible. And we have a letter from the IRS that I can share with anyone. Actually, it's up on the website that basically says we're a foundation, basically, that receives money, and in acknowledgement of that money, you can use our letter to get a tax write-off. As I kind of touched on, but let me be very specific. The board of directors of the foundation, which consists of 3 people, myself, Henry Rebick, who is at home taking care of kids, and Phil Rose, who's off flying in the world somewhere. We are working on getting a meeting with Karen. We've drawn up a list of bylaws that are slightly different than the old ones that existed. The state of Washington has changed the incorporation laws, and we need to know how that's going to affect us. But one of the things we learned last March, and this is kind of what Noel was talking about, is a foundation is not an operational entity. It is a funding entity. And the operational entity is the SGC. And you can't combine the two. If you want to have the tax-free, or I should say the tax-exempt capability and the tax-deductible capability that the foundation offers. So we hope by the end of this week to have a lot of those questions answered. We are in the midst of making this meeting happen, and I will be happy to share on SGC News anything that we are able to and know about as soon as we do know it. But understand that the board of directors of the foundation have been active and studying for quite a while this last summer to understand what a purpose of a foundation is, how it works, what we can do, and we're trying to figure out what we can't do, and among other things, being able to deliver grants and opportunities like scholarships. These are all things that make sense and would further the purposes of the foundation as it has always existed, which is to promote advanced soaring and all soaring in the Pacific Northwest.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, no, let's see here. Oh, my mic is still on. Yeah, Mike, I understood that that part of it. I guess I just wanted to make sure that you understand what I'm suggesting here is that, to be brief, is there would there be an advantage or something, or you could ask the attorney when you meet with her, is there any advantage in our case to dissolve the foundation and just move the assets over to SGC?
I'm not sure we can do that.
Possible.
Yeah, okay, I don't know if we can do that.
What happens when a foundation dissolves?
So, yeah, all corporations are legal entities that do not die until they choose to die. That's the
Agreed.
event.
Yes, I've dealt with that. Yes, I understand that. Yeah.
So I'd be happy to ask her, but I don't think it gives us any advantage. I think the better advantage is to have a foundation that is functioning as a foundation, which I hope we can do before the end of this year. I think that's a better advantage.
From what you're telling me, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I really want to put this in your mind as a possibility, and that is the only real advantage that you're telling me is that people can donate and write off their donation. That's all fine and dandy, but what kind of cash flow do you actually get from that on a given year? I know it started out to build the clubhouse. I know the DG 1000 was part of that when it was gifted after after John Daly died. But since that time, is that a meaningful cash flow?
Okay, if you'd like to talk about that, let's carry this offline. I'd be happy to tell you what it is. We actually produce a report every year. We do make $2,000 or $3,000 when we put on some of these events, and what we have or haven't done with those $2,000 or $3,000 is what I'm trying to change.
Mike, I think this is Tori. I think what you're getting at is, if we reconstitute what the foundation is trying to accomplish and build a sense of purpose for that outcome, that would generate more income in the future than we've seen recently. I think that's what you're getting at in reconstituting the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. That because, okay, you guys, most of you don't know me from Adam, but I know something about the industry of aviation, and we have something to offer, and they are willing to pay for it. And it's a matter of going to the right people, making the correct presentation. And that's the purpose of some of the members of the board that have not necessarily understood that in the past. So I understand that. and I'd like to make it happen. So I'm not necessarily believing that it's in the best interest of SGC or the foundation to combine the two.
I think it's interesting to think about putting Jim's comments on business models and the concept of a few different income streams. I think that's a really important component for us to talk about. I have some additional comments on that specific topic if it's appropriate now, or I can wait till later.
Tori, let me just put you on pause there for a quick sec if I could. And let me just ask, we've got, 16 or so folks here who haven't spoken up. And I just want to make sure we give everyone a chance if they've got thoughts along these topics, especially looking back at financial sustainability, business models you mentioned, tow plane maintenance, what to do with the pending overhaul and two tow plane situation. And I see we have a customer. James, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to start off with, I have to say that this discussion is really disappointing. We spent the last half an hour and a half saying that we're in a dead thermal. Yes, we're in a dead thermal. We can all see the dead thermal. We've been in it for years, but we're still sticking in the dead thermal. Well, why don't we look for a new bloody thermal? Looking at your foundation, promoting soaring in the Pacific Northwest, sponsoring contests, assisting youth and new pilots. I haven't heard anything about new pilots. Let's talk about that for a bit. There's a whole bunch of people, new pilots, newly licensed pilots that want to learn how to fly cross country. We're addressing that in our own backyard in Evergreen, Soaring, with initiatives that we're pursuing. What do new students bring? They bring lots of tows. If you had, and I haven't heard anything about the SGC Foundation's money from the DG 1000 insurance payout, what's happening with that? If you were to buy another two-place ship and had tow pilots and mentor pilots that are willing to populate a schedule in a meaningful way during the soaring season, I'm sure we'd have students willing to come out on a regular basis to fly and learn. And also you're getting more toes, turn around. And more importantly, you get a critical mass of activity, just as you do in a regular club, where all the cross-country hotshots will come out when they think the conditions, warrant it. So let me just do a quick poll if people are willing to stick with me here for a minute. Let's ask a couple of new pilots. Zohaib, putting you on the spot here. If we had a two-place ship out at Ephrata and mentor pilots like Noel or Mike Bamberg or whomever that are willing to provide cross-country mentoring for you, would you be willing to go out multiple times over the soaring season for a weekend, not a week-long encampment, to take advantage of that type of opportunity?
James, yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot. But no, I think I do agree with that. Like the one of the limitations I've seen, at least for me this season, was on the west side, there isn't, of course, much opportunity to do cross country soaring for beginners. On the east there is, but I don't have a ship. I mean, I know Noel has been gracious with the due discuss, and that was one of the highlights for me personally for the last season. And I am definitely would have been willing to come if there were kind of other availability for gliders, and of course, mentors available to teach or like to kind of guide as well in that case. I did intended to go another weekend, but the smog was a problem as well. But no, absolutely, I agree with that.
Okay, I'll just ask one other person, Jonathan Hart, one of our ambitious young youth pilots. Jonathan, if SGC Foundation had a two-place ship there with mentor pilots out there on a regular basis, would you be willing to go out there a number of times over the course of the soaring season?
Jonathan Hart would be one of the mentors.
Okay, well, so be it.
Or a tow pilot.
Or a tow pilot. Yeah.
Okay.
So
hey,
James?
guys, Jonathan's been trying to come off mute and actually speak for himself because he's a real human being. So let's give him a sec. What do you think, John?
That's what I was gonna say. I've already been flying cross country. I wouldn't be taking mentor flights. I was actually gonna ask you, Noel, at some point. This can be a different meeting, separate. What the tow pilot qualifications are, or what that takes. I'll talk to you about.
Okay, well, we can circle back to that, but I'm just wanting to finish up a thought here that you're talking about not having sufficient tows. There is a bunch of people that are wanting to get into cross country, that there's limited opportunities to do so. This is one way to do that. And it's also to help get a critical mass of activity out at a freighter, so that the broader experienced cross-country pilots, kind of like Tony was saying, that you don't put your hand, there's enough people out there that when you do want to go out there, that something's happening.
Okay, so James, let me just put this in and then I'll shut up again. These are all things that we've discussed on the foundation, but have not been able to bring out. And it's not something that we're not opening the kimono to all the different things we've discussed, but these are many of the same things that we're trying to change in what's going on at Ephrata. And whether or not it's a two-place ship or single-place ships for people to use, these are all things that we have put into the mix of things we're going to consider. But we're not ready to.
None of that's been mentioned this evening.
Because we're not ready to talk about it.
Okay, well,
Hang on.
just
Sorry,
talking about selling off the family jewels. That's all.
James, I'm going to put you on pause there. I appreciate everything you're bringing up, and I think you're making some very valid points. Before this gets tense, I just want to say one of the things that's important to note is this is an SGC meeting, and I will say for myself, as the chairman of the board of the SGC, I didn't think it was my place to bring up the Soaring Foundation side of things because I'm not on that board, and this is not a Soaring Foundation meeting. So if anyone else is frustrated or concerned about the fact that some of these things like two-place gliders and single-place gliders haven't been brought up yet, is because those are things that the SGC Soaring Foundation has been looking at. And what the Soaring Foundation does is entirely separate from what the SGC does. This goes back to my earlier slide about us being two related but separate entities, right? And the topic tonight, or the focus tonight, is how do we, as the SGC, figure out how to be sustainable, right? And James, to your point, if you want to say, hey, I think the way that the SGC is successful is that we work hand in glove with the foundation and we make sure that there is more youth opportunity out there, then that's an awesome suggestion. But it's not something with the money that the SGC has on hand that we can do. And for whatever it's worth with the Soaring Foundation, they don't own any tow planes, so they can't just unilaterally decide to do that, also for potentially legal reasons that we've covered. So that's that. But I do appreciate the things you're bringing up, James, and they are worth considering. Tori, go ahead.
Thanks a lot. So I agree with all the sentiment here. Jim Dobberfield's comment about business models and needing to change our business model made me think a little bit about an experience I had leading an airplane flying club based in Everett a little over a decade ago. We were in a situation where we did not have sufficient reserves to cover our engine overhauls that were coming due. We had a declining membership. We had increasing costs to operate our tow planes, or excuse me, our airplanes. This is an airplane flying club. And we had an aging membership. The members were flying less and less. Our maintenance costs were continuing to increase, and our cost per flight hour was going up. For a number of years prior to that, we were raising the rates of our airplanes, and the per hour cost was going up because people were flying less. And that's a death spiral situation. We thought about our business model substantially as part of that. There were 2 or 3 different levers that we had to pull to come out of the spiral dive that we were in. I'll just share a couple of examples just as food for thought, not as recommendations or specific direction for our situation, but it might be illuminating. Number one, we sought to reinvigorate the membership. I think this is something that James was talking about. We want to increase flying activities, both ourselves and among others. This was an equity flying club, and having more members that were willing to pay to fly improved the value of our shares. All of us that own gliders, I don't own a glider yet, but those of us who do own gliders will get better value from your glider when you want to sell, when you want to upgrade, when you want to get out of the sport, if there's an increasing pool of people. That was a problem that we had to solve in the club. Second problem we had to solve is that we wanted to pay for flying. We didn't want to pay for not flying. So we made some changes, which I'll explain here in a moment about that. So the levers that we pulled was, number one, all of our members were benefiting having planes available to fly, even if they weren't flying as much. So we incentivized everyone to fly more by requiring them to pay for a certain number of hours each month, regardless of whether they flew. What that did was incentivize people to go out and fly. It helped us to cover our costs, but it got people flying more. And when they started flying more, they actually increased their activity because they were current, they were proficient, and they had to pay for it anyway. We could do something similar where we have a certain number of tows, given the number of tow planes that we have, that we need to fly to operate. We could incentivize people to buy more tows up front, maybe at a lower cost. People that take fewer tows maybe pay a higher cost. There are ways to deal with that. It may include a membership fee that includes a certain number of tows, regardless of whether you use them, and people will be incentivized to come out and actually fly. Secondly, we reinvested the money that we accrued through these additional charges back into improving the planes so that we could improve the operation of the club and improve the usefulness and the attractiveness. That improved our demand for additional services from the club, and it improved the share value of the club as well. The second thing that we did was we incentivized club social events and activities so that people felt a renewed sense of belonging in the club and felt like it was a special thing to be a part of. So those are just a couple of specific ideas. I had mentioned the idea of charging 4 tows up front in the season, a specific minimum number of tows earlier on this year, and was wondering if it was talked about as well previously.
I don't recall that we ended up looking too closely at a minimum number of tows. We've talked about wrapping our disparate fees into an all-inclusive fee. And, this is something, again, we haven't debated heavily, but I've certainly thought about a lot, is we have these facility fees and tie down fees and whatever, and it might be both simpler for the membership as well as financially better for us. And just like you were talking about, encourage participation to just say, hey, here's the fee you got to pay. And part of that is because we offer a facility and you're paying for it. And if you don't come out and use it, that's on you. But this is what it takes to have a facility. So we're going to charge all of our members the facility fee included with your membership fee, right? And that's the way we do it.
Yeah,
being an
one other
event-based site has some wrinkles in there we'd want to examine, but I'm certainly thinking that those are some interesting lines of inquiry, and I appreciate the suggestions you brought up, Tori. I think those are some really good lessons. Thank you for sharing.
Some of the other things that we did in the club, many of our costs that were actually fixed costs were baked into our hourly rates, and that artificially inflated the hourly rates. So what we did is we changed our due structure to include higher dues fees, so that basically, if we didn't operate the planes at all, the club still covered its costs. Now, we may not go that far in this situation, but if we moved some of the fees that we recover through tows to dues instead, people would perceive a lower tow cost. They would actually have a lower tow cost, and that might incentivize higher demand for tows. So there's some things that we need to think about in that respect. Other income streams is another thing that we ought to be thinking about. Good idea to get more events, get more activity. That's really great. Other ideas might include, for example, releasing the 182 as part of a club operation, allow proficient pilots to fly and pay for flights in the 182. Maybe we only do that in the off season or something around those lines, or during the midweek when it's not otherwise used. We ought to think about getting local people to Moses Lake and Ephrata that might be willing to tow a little bit more on a moment's notice to improve the ability of tow pilots. Anyway, some of those ideas, many things are probably going to have to come together. It's not going to be one thing to make this work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tori. And I'm eager to hear from anybody else, and then we'll draw this to a close before we hit 9 p.m. But I will say the idea of local tow pilots is something that was raised in the off-season last year, and we did start working on that this year. Mike Bamberg has connections over with the Big Bend Community College that has a flight program at Moses Lake, and we did get some definite interest there. We had some folks eager to move forward. For various and sundry reasons, between weather, tow plane hiccups, people scheduling issues, difficulties aligning schedules for tow plane pilot checkouts occasionally, we did not get as far down that path this year as I would have liked to see, but it is something that is still ongoing, and we are hopeful that this will continue to pick up steam next year, and we will get, hopefully, some tow pilots out of the local area, or at least that are living in the Moses Lake area for a year or 2 or 3 while they're going through these flight programs, to make last minute tows available. Before we move on, does anybody else have any thoughts or ideas they want to throw out at this time?
Noel, I do. If you can hear me.
Absolutely, go for it.
A couple thoughts. One, a couple tow pilots that tow on the west side have not wanted to come over to the east side because we didn't have enough tows on a weekend for them to come put their tent up and participate. So that's just one thing. But also, we encourage in all of our cross-country training how to fly longer flights or stay up longer in the day. And I'm one of those old timers that remember when a lot of people came back for relights often throughout the year, and that has progressively been less as our gliders have become higher performance. Pilots have become better cross-country pilots, and so we have less. And also, when we were talking about originally buying the 182, a big part of that conversation was that there are going to be motor gliders coming along, and we're going to have fewer tows because people are going to have motor gliders and do their own launches. So those are just some other elements that I haven't heard much discussion on as we think about this. So I'll shut up and just pass that in.
That's good data points. Thanks, Ron. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, actually, I raised my hand just as Ron mentioned motor gliders. But that's what I want to say is we're tending to go more and more towards self-launch sailplanes. And I think with the new battery technology and the electric self-launch, it's going to become more common. I know they're expensive, but then there's also syndicates, where you can share expenses on a single airplane and get into them. And so I think down the road, we need to think ahead 5-10 years. How much longer are we going to be able to sustain these tow planes as we transition to self-launchers? So that's something to keep in mind as well. But the other thing that Tori mentioned that intrigued me was that, we could maybe utilize the airplanes more year-round, especially if it's like a Cessna 182, where you can offer it to be used by the club members individually, and maybe we get local people in the Freda area join SGC just to fly that 182 through the winter, and then we could help bring in more revenue to maintain those tow planes better and keep them in good shape. So that's just an idea.
No, that's a good one. Thank you. And I'm going to throw one other thing out there that I want people to know the board has considered, although we would love your thoughts on this, especially those of you here that are part of other clubs like the Evergreen and Willamette Valley folks in this call. SGC is a coordinating body to support soaring throughout the Northwest, in a slightly different way than the foundation, but both are not just Freda bound, which means we are also open to working with other clubs and establishing agreements, memorandums of understanding or financial arrangements that ensure that our tow planes are used more effectively around the year. Maybe one of the clubs you're involved with could use an extra tow plane at times of the year. Maybe it would be more efficient for them to change the way they're using their tow planes, and we could do some kind of melded operation throughout the year where our tow planes are a shared resource across multiple groups. There's lots of potential permutations there, but just something to throw into people's minds, and the more of us thinking about that, the better. So any thoughts you have on that are welcome. All right. Unless anybody raises their hand with a big important point, I'm going to go ahead and take us to a couple questions and then a couple minutes of wrap up here. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, just circling back to newer members, is there any plans to provide any specific to address the needs of new cross-country members?
Yes, in a variety of formal and informal ways. As Mike mentioned, the foundation is working that angle in a bunch of different ways right now. I am certainly going to continue to offer mentorship flights, and we are going to be looking at things like not only continuing the dust up, but also holding the Hood River Youth cross-country encampment if possible. And if any groups or organizations or clubs want to put on an event, or any individual members say, hey, I've got an idea for an event, we as the board are all ears, and we'd be happy to work with you to facilitate those things happening.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, did you want me to talk about Condor at all today?
Yes, if you could, give me just a sec. Real quick, is there anyone here who wants to raise their hand and say, yes, absolutely, when some portion of the board meets to talk about the future of the tow planes and our business plans, I would like to be a part of that, or I'm willing to be a part of that conversation and offer ideas and help. Tori, thank you very much. Appreciate your involvement. Anybody else? Terry, okay, and Andrew, great. I'm assuming that's Terry Crippen. Speak up if I'm wrong. And Andrew, I don't have your last name there. Sorry, which Andrew is this?
It's Ouellet, O-U-E-L-L-E-T.
I'm sorry, one more time, please.
O-U-E-L-L-E-T, pronounced Ouellet.
Ouellet, okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate it. Awesome. Okay. All three of you, stand by. I will reach out to you in the next day or so. Ron, are you also raising your hand, or do you have a question or a point?
Yeah, I raised my hand.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that as members, you guys want to play an active role in our future. It's awesome. Like I said, stand by. I'll send out some emails in the next couple of days after this meeting, and we'll start to get some conversations going amongst us. Now, additionally, I would like to encourage everybody on this call, anybody watching this call in replay and recording format, and any of you that are part of multiple clubs, please take this message back to your clubs and say, we would love to have as open and wide of a discussion about this as possible. This is a multidimensional issue. As James put it emphatically earlier, this is a problem we've talked about off and on for years, but now is the time to actually pick some paths and go. So let's brainstorm a little bit and then make some action happen here over the next couple of months. And in order to facilitate that, please use the SGC News Group to foster discussion. If this is something you are not aware of, the SGC News Group, stand by. I have a slide at the end here about how you can get there and join that group. And we'd love to have everybody throwing their ideas into the melting pot so that this narrower group can be picking up those ideas, debating them, having conversations with those of you that pitch ideas, and then take action. Thank you. So we're running low on time. Tori started off with the St. Alban story. I would love to have Mike talk a little bit about Condor. So really quick, does anybody have a really cool first or best achievement or adventure this season that you want to bring up before we're out of time tonight? Go ahead, Brian.
I'm going to let Jonathan talk. He went to the Region 4 contest and didn't tell anybody about it yet. You there, Jonathan?
Yeah, so it was in
Man, you're getting put on the spot twice in one night, Jonathan.
it was in Virginia. And so pretty much I wasn't actually competing, but I got to fly the Discus 2C, really nice glider. And basically we got to run the ridge. Well, one day, the first day was on the ridges, so like 100 knots, and we only went like 30 miles out. We didn't do anything too crazy, but just a couple hundred feet off the trees, and that's the coolest ridge flying I've done. But other than that, just some thermal flying and good experience.
Awesome. Was this like in preparation for maybe participating in some juniors events, or was this just an opportunity to go to Virginia and check out the ridge?
Kind of a little both, maybe.
Very cool. Now, I know you got the ridge at Hood River, but this is a little different, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And a side note on this, the Sandhill Soaring has this discus that they keep just for juniors that they'll haul around to different events for juniors that need to come across the country. And there's a minimal fee to join Sandhill Soaring for a quarter at a time. And Chris Schrader over there is quite interested in hauling this to different places if juniors want to go out there and either compete or take part in an event where they can't haul their own glider or a club glider out there.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. That sounds very similar to something that I'm helping Garrett Willett do, which is to make one or two older gliders like a LaBelle and a classic discus available for up and coming contest pilots to fly if they don't have their own contest ships. So that's awesome that Sandhill's ahead of the game on that one. Cool. Any other things, Jonathan, about the experience there, Virginia, you want to mention?
Not really. That was a bit about it. The ridge flying was it was different and it was a lot of fun. Just yeah.
Very cool. Well, if you want more ridge, just know that you don't have to go all the way to Virginia. There's also northern Utah has some pretty awesome ridge too. So look forward to hearing you eventually fly that and tell me how that all stacks up.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Jonathan and Brian. Mike, can I turn it over to you for just a minute or two? Folks, what I'm going to ask is for you to let Mike tell you about one way you can keep your skills sharp this winter, stay connected to the flying community, and have some fun. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. So I believe many of you have either encountered Condor or know about it or heard about it. But for the last about 15 years, the Willamette Valley Club has had wintertime Condor events. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been the one running that. And we've done a number of different things, different ways of having multiplayer, multi-pilot events. We've done races. We've done safaris. Safaris via glider, where we started out in Bend and then flew up to Madras and then flew over to Walla Walla and just kind of toured the Pacific Northwest with one flight per week. I run the server. It's a separate server than is involved with the Condor Club or any of the other ones. And this coming year, so far the feedback I've had is that most of what people are interested in doing is flying in Ephrata, flying in their own personal areas. So there is a unique landscape for Ephrata, one for Willamette Valley, one for Arlington, I believe. But then there's also what's called the Cascades, which covers from just about Sacramento all the way north to the Canadian border and east to about Boise. But we have all these different ones. I have a Google group called WVSC-Condor. It is an invite only Google group. But if you would like to be aware and be informed when we're doing our various events, just send me an email. You can either use my Mike B at seattleglidercouncil.org. That's one count, or cirruscfi@gmail.com. And simply send me your email, and that way I'll put you on the group and you will be able to join in and see what we're doing. If you have never used online racing with Condor, you're missing a delight. And one of the neat things is if you do happen to have a midair, nobody dies.
Way to really sell it with a positive note at the end.
Well, the other thing is it really gives you an opportunity to learn decision making. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I think I've got your email addresses here on the screen. Does that look right?
Yep, that looks right.
Okay, so if anybody's interested, you want to do a little flying with Mike and myself and others this winter, email Mike. It's a lot of fun. I think sometimes, Mike, haven't we even set it up so that we've been able to jump into the quote unquote back seat with somebody and kind of fly over their shoulder and observe?
So in fact, about a year ago, the Condor team created something they called a spectator. So that allows you to be in the cockpit and see most of the controls and see where the glider is going and how it's turning about. When I'm doing any kind of remote instruction with Condor, it allows me to, you get to see what the controls are doing, but of course you don't have any access to them. There's no dual multiplayer duel available in Condor yet, but a lot of people are looking forward to it.
Yeah, but even the observation method is nice for anybody that's a little unsure of themselves, or they want a little coaching and it's the winter season and the weather's not good. The nice thing is you could talk to somebody like myself or Mike or another Condor capable mentor or instructor, and we can hop on a session and we can do some coaching and some mentoring right there, whether it's individually or as part of one of these multiplayer sessions as well, where we have a known task and a known goal. So a lot of fun stuff. Encourage folks who are curious, reach out to Mike for more info, and we'll hope to see you then. Thanks, Mike. All right. As we wrap up tonight, last thing I want to leave you guys with, well, second to last thing, is also in the vein of staying connected over the winter. Please spread the word about the SGC News Google group. For those of you that are not familiar, this is an open resource for Pacific Northwest soaring pilots to have open dialogue. It's one of the main places that for many years, the SGC Club has had sort of just general open chat. It's been somewhat inactive since COVID hit, but we're all in this together. We've all got similar questions, things we want to do. There's a ton of knowledge, and it's not a negative interaction space like sometimes the big social media areas or news groups can be. So if you want to discuss things with some of your fellow Northwest pilots, go to the Google Groups site, go to this URL. It's SGC_news. You don't even have to sign up if you want to read. It's open for the public to read. But if you want to sign up, you can then post. You can get messages delivered right into your email inbox. So it just looks like email for you, like a mailing list. You don't have to go to the website to use it. And it's a great way for us to all stay connected, answer questions, find resources, etc. Encourage you to sign up if you haven't already, and encourage you to ask your fellow club members and other clubs to sign up as well. So we have a coordinating communications conduit for everybody. And as I mentioned, we will use the SGC News group to foster more open discussion and ideas about the future of our tow planes and operations. Any questions or concerns about the SGC News group? All right, then it is 9 o'clock. Reminder, facility closing is October 7th. For those of you that can make it, I really appreciate it. Our next general member meeting will be November 6th. And we hope to see you at the banquet on December 2nd. Thanks so much, everybody. You're welcome to have a good night or come off mute and have general chat if you like. I will go ahead and stop the recording. And again, thank you, everybody, for your participation tonight. Hope to chat with you soon.